Brace yourselves, folks, because this is the blockbuster meltdown no one saw coming, except maybe everyone on the internet. Disney's Snow White remake has finally crashed into theaters after 2 long years of leaks, delays, and endless controversy. And oh, what a spectacle it is. Imagine hype so flat you could iron a gown on it, a swirl of backstage feuds that would make any telenovela proud, and one of Hollywood's biggest studios essentially tiptoeing around its own leading lady. If that doesn't spell disaster with a capital D, I don't know what does. It all started quietly, almost eerily, as the release date approached. Audiences used to expect a roaring marketing machine, red carpets brimming with A-listers, and daily interviews claiming, "This is the reimagining you never knew you needed." Instead, we got the hush 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 of a studio that looked like it knew it had a ticking time bomb on its hands. 2 weeks before showtime, the world collectively held its breath in what insiders jokingly called the calm before the storm. A calm that ended in a cinematic storm so chaotic, it's arguably Disney's most baffling flop in years. So what went wrong? Everything. Allegedly. Let's start with the film itself. You'd think revisiting one of the most iconic fairy tales of all time, Disney's very first feature-length animation, the one that birthed a legend, would be a no-brainer. But the new Snow White is what some critics have called a Franken-movie because it mashes together 2 incompatible visions. On one hand, you can see glimpses of sweet, naive Snow White from the original 1937 classic. She's swirling around a castle, humming to herself, and wearing that timeless innocence like it's the hottest trend on the runway. Yet in the very next scene, Rachel Zegler's version morphs into a headstrong rebel who wants to lead the kingdom, scolds her potential prince for mansplaining, and basically shows off a 21st century #girl boss attitude. The whiplash is real, folks. Insiders claim these abrupt personality shifts are thanks to frantic reshoots after test audiences, and the entire internet dragged the film for turning Snow White into a completely different character. The result? A protagonist who can't decide if she wants to scrub floors while singing "Someday My Prince Will Come" or stage a political revolution with a pointed glare.
I say, if I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
And let's talk about that prince. Wait, scratch that. He's not even called a prince here. Introducing Jonathan, the conveniently available love interest who starts off resenting Snow White's so-called privilege, only to fall head over heels for her in the blink of an arrow. Yes, an arrow, because that's how Disney tells us they're in love. Jonathan literally takes one for the team after knowing her for what, 2 days at most? Never mind that there's zero actual chemistry, no banter, no meaningful backstory. It's a forced romance so rushed it makes the short-lived fling in The Little Mermaid look like an epic romance novel by comparison. If you're searching for a reason they're soulmates, don't bother. You won't find it here. Even the final curse-breaking moment that once made the original Snow White so magical falls spectacularly flat because it's predicated on an epic love that never quite materializes on screen. But wait. There's more in the meltdown department. The final showdown with Gal Gadot's evil queen has fans scratching their heads as if they just watched an avant-garde art film. One moment, the queen is a menacing sorceress who can poison apples and wither roses at will, and the next, she's stepping outside the castle like, "Oh, Snow White's here? Let me check my reflection real quick." The townsfolk, who apparently haven't laid eyes on the princess in years, instantly recognize her simply because she takes off her red hood. No stirring call to arms, no cunning infiltration, just a dramatic hood reveal, and voila, the entire kingdom's ready to overthrow tyranny. Then the queen tries to conjure a dagger, fails to land a single blow, and scurries back to her magic mirror like a child who just lost a recess fight. In a twist that might be described as comedic if it weren't so baffling, she breaks the mirror in a fit of rage. And that alone dooms her, as she gets sucked into some swirling interdimensional mirror vortex that's never explained. It's the cinematic equivalent of an author shrugging and saying, "Hey, she's gone. Roll the credits." Talk about a lackluster conclusion. Now, if that were all, maybe Disney could chalk this up to a misguided artistic experiment. But the real drama is, of course, backstage. Sources claim the tension between Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot reached epic proportions, allegedly fueling the awkwardness at the film's press events.
Okay, she writes, "I find myself speechless in the midst of this. Another 4 years of hatred, leaning us towards a world I do not want to live in, leaning us towards a world that will be hard to raise my daughter in. P.S. She has no daughter. She has no children at all. Leading us towards a world that will force her, who's her, your daughter who doesn't exist, okay, to have a baby she doesn't want.
At one point, the studio reportedly tried to keep them on separate continents, Godot doing her fluff interviews about how she loves playing a fierce female role, and Zegler being shipped around international events where few reporters would risk cornering her with tricky questions. Why such caution? Because Zegler's earlier interviews famously trashed the original Snow White, calling Prince Charming a stalker and mocking the old-school romance.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Needless to say, fans of the 1937 masterpiece did not take it lightly, and the outraged uproar was strong enough to trend on social media for weeks. Disney had clearly decided that every additional quote from Zegler was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. But even with the press heavily controlled, Zegler found ways to ruffle feathers by suddenly praising the original film, calling it an honor to be part of something people are so passionate about. Many fans saw this as too little, too late, a desperate attempt to placate the outraged masses. Then came the Academy Awards fiasco. The two co-stars were forced to present an award together, presumably to show that everything was peachy between them. But watchers say it was like an iceberg and a volcano forced to stand side by side. No playful banter, no stolen side glances, just forced smiles as they read their lines off the teleprompter and avoided acknowledging each other's presence. The tension was thicker than old-school theatrical fog, and tabloids exploded with rumors that these two can't stand each other. Allegedly, the friction was so severe that Disney made the unprecedented move of scaling down the Snow White premiere in Los Angeles and outright canceling the big London event. Think about it. Disney, the entertainment titan known for lavish red carpet spectacles, practically sweeping the film's promo under the rug. The reason, sources say, was a combination of negative audience sentiment, the comedic meltdown of advanced ticket sales, and that unstoppable feud swirling between its leading ladies. It was reminiscent of when Warner Brothers tried to underplay The Flash because of its leading actors' controversies, except this time, it's a swirling synergy of creative confusion and co-star drama that simply couldn't be contained. Then there's the box office faceplant. Disney typically opens advanced ticket sales well over a month before a release, pushing hype through the roof. Snow White? They waited until 2 weeks out, almost as if they hoped audiences would forget everything they'd heard. But advanced sales moved at a snail's pace. The film's opening weekend projections nosedived from a hopeful 65 to 68 million down to a dismal 48 million, putting it in the same catastrophic league as The Marvels. Another Disney fiasco. Some analysts pointed fingers at the ancient origin of the story, arguing that kids these days don't connect with a character born in the 1930s. But fans who actually saw the film countered that maybe, just maybe, the problem is that it's an incoherent mess. Cue the PR spin. Outlets like Variety and a handful of others that were invited to the restricted premiere initially praised the film, calling it a visual feast and the best live-action remake in years. Audiences everywhere else thought they'd stepped into a parallel universe. The positivity from certain critics smelled suspiciously like a puff piece, designed to give Disney some positive headlines. Allegedly, media manipulation went deeper than that. People noticed suspicious edits to Hollywood Reporter articles, seemingly retconning how the controversial CGI dwarfs came into being. One moment, it was publicly known that production changed those dwarfs because of backlash over offensive stereotypes. The next, the text insisted it was always part of director Mark Webb's grand vision. Folks, PDF screenshots don't lie, and the internet erupted with receipts. It appeared as though the studio was trying to rewrite history, a move that only further sank the film's credibility. And once the real critics, unshackled by studio invitations, started posting their reviews, any illusion of redemption for Snow White evaporated. The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw deemed it exhaustingly awful, calling out its hollow attempts at pseudo-progressive storytelling. The Independent blasted it as lazy and visually repellent, while CBS News didn't mince words, grouping it among films that chip away at our culture simply by existing. Even outlets typically friendly to Disney threw up their hands and said, "Yeah, we can't defend this." With disastrous word-of-mouth swirling on social media, the movie crashed and burned at the box office. proving that no amount of forced positivity, hush-hush press junkets, or last-minute marketing spin could save an already sinking ship. For Disney, this fiasco could be the loudest wake-up call yet, signaling that audiences have grown tired of half-baked remakes that hinge more on brand recognition than quality storytelling. Some insiders warn that future projects might face the same uncertain fate if the studio doesn't learn from this meltdown. Enough questionable reboots and even the House of Mouse's golden reputation can tarnish. The big question now, where does Disney go from here? Will they revert to basics and produce faithful, heartfelt retellings that honor the magic of the originals? Or will they keep doubling down on divisive decisions and star power illusions, hoping the controversy somehow translates into ticket sales? Only time, and perhaps the next generation of reboots, will tell. But one thing is absolutely certain. The new Snow White's legacy won't be its script or its songs. It'll be remembered for backstage feuds, bizarre storyline whiplash, and a PR meltdown so epic, it might become a cautionary tale in film schools everywhere. So what do you think, folks? Did backstage bickering kill the film, or was it doomed from the start by a jumbled vision that never found its footing? Let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's biggest disasters and behind-the-scenes bombshells. Because in this town, you never know which fairy tale will turn into a fiasco next. Thanks for watching, stay skeptical, and remember, just because there's a magic mirror involved doesn't mean you'll like the reflection you see.